Baldur's Gate 3 is an out-and-out critical success, Game of the Year and some of the best storytelling in games that I've experienced so far, with a ton of character emotion that is told in every word spoken by its voice actors. So, as a player of the game it used as the very framework, Dungeons & Dragons, what can we learn from Baldur's Gate 3 and take into our tabletop games? I sat down to think about this and came up with 5 things that I think are the easiest takeaways from BG3. 1. Anything can be level scaled. Mind Flayers and Demons at level 1. Sometimes in TTRPGs we get this general sense that everything has to be done according to the rules as written. At level 1 you're a new character barely more fit than a villager going out into the world. But that doesn't have to be true. And arguably in the game it isn't already. Level 1 characters are actually quite strong compared to NPCs of comparable CR. Baldur's Gate 3's opening made me think, well, why don't more games start in such a crazy opening, at least in a TTRPG setting? What is wrong with the heroes just escaping, let's say, a dragon's lair, or Avernus, trying to flee a warring kingdom, or avoiding being hunted by shadowed knights, like something similar to the Ringwraiths? It's fairly common, at least in video games, to have the opening where everything is kind of put together and going fine, then falls apart at the last minute, or you're escaping from imprisonments like something in Oblivion. But I feel like only recently we're seeing this start to become a thing in TTRPGs, and really, why not more? And okay, you might immediately say, well, okay then, these are high level creatures, or dangerous scenarios. Far too dangerous. Your characters will just get killed. But they don't have to. In Baldur's Gate 3, it shows us that you can provide these experiences and not belittle the creatures. We dealt with very minor devils or fiends and mind flayer scenarios at the earliest of levels. However, what was important is that we never fought a full-on powered mind flayer or a real archdevil or something crazy at level 1. We fought weakened characters in a dangerous scenario that painted the need and intent for escape. Even a creature that was wounded was painted as a deadly foe that we couldn't stay around with because they would destroy us. It's all about the framework and the setting in which you deploy these foes. They can be used against lower level characters, but you need to still hint at how deadly they truly are. If you were to say borrow this idea and have heroes escaping a dragon's lair after being captured, you wouldn't have them fight the dragon, but perhaps here, let's say the dragon's roar, and rushing to fight kobold captors instead and escape imprisonment. And in the midst of their escape, they hear the dragon sound off and roar intensely, and this rushes their need to get out now. You set the scenario to feel more dangerous than it mechanically is. The dragon might actually never be there, apart for some kind of, let's say, scenario where they go into the horde accidentally, and you make a big show of it. TTRPGs, at least in the current modern era of D&D and gaming in general for tabletop, are more about storytelling at heart. Even wargame-like scenarios are benefited by just having a little narrative pizzazz. So don't be afraid to start off crazy. It can work. Just don't remove the bite from the scenario. If your players really do get insane and decide to fight that dragon, well, don't be afraid to kill them. After all, they did kind of invite it. My second point. A recurring NPC does not have to be a DMPC. I had to think of a few examples for this, to just not heavily spoil game characters, but I think the easiest way to do this is just talking about Act 1 in Baldur's Gate 3. You'll find characters such as the goblins or tieflings that reappear in other locations in the game, and other acts. Most of the time, these characters are honestly not that important to the overall plot. They could die and it probably wouldn't change too much. They're minor bit characters in a huge game. Yet, seeing them again and moving along in their adventure really gives the world a sense of life, and a sense that everyone around you is still progressing, doing things and trying to just live their life. In a static world, well, that can be comforting. You know what it is and how it will be, but it's not very immersive. Having characters like these that continue along on their journey helps to alleviate that idea of a static world. Oftentimes, the notion of a recurring NPC in D&D and TTRPGs invites the dreaded DMPC, a character that is so explosively overpowered or always knows what to do. It is admittedly hard to escape that as a DM you literally know what to do at all times. However, a recurring NPC doesn't have to be a DMPC. A recurring shopkeeper or a travelling character who somehow always keeps surviving these horrible scenarios and acknowledges the player in the next tavern over. Group of refugees that are on the same path or take an alternate and you see them later. An adventuring band who solved the quest that your party didn't want to do and now regale them with just how it went in the local inn. There are these kinds of things that I feel I could expect to see in Baldur's Gate, and it's something that we should look to do in our games. If you create a world, or even just something akin to the Forgotten Realms, then these are living, breathing worlds. The people inside them move, fight, work and explore, and so show that. Show that in your games. Let characters roam around, even in a small sense. Why does the shopkeeper need to always stay in his store every day? Maybe he closes on Fridays and characters can see him around in the town. Maybe he's up to something. Maybe you can incorporate that into a quest. Emotional investment is built through characters, and it's hard to be invested in a character that shows up one time, and even the most minor choices involved in that character could lead to a recurring NPC that can feel great. There is a reason that there are countless stories of people adopting random goblins and kobolds that they find on their journey and then becoming their favourite character. The named character, the boblin, the hoblin, whatever you want to call it. It's just that kind of thing. A minor NPC that probably didn't have any relevance, and yet the party adore them. 3. Choices matter, even the minor ones. Baldur's Gate has so many little choices in how you deal with scenarios. Freeing certain NPCs and killing them, knocking them out. In doing so, there is a series of cause and effect. You do something differently in one run, and it leads to an entirely different scenario that you may have had in another. Killing a goblin leads to a hostile encampment, wherein eating your pride and perhaps befriending one opens up an entirely new hub area. In one scenario, they're all your enemies. In the other, now they're your friends. As referenced in a prior section, emotional investment is built through characters, and the player characters are such. Their stories and actions should have consequence. If you anger a town, then perhaps the town should remember. A patrol could be sent out or a warrant issued. If they save the alchemist's son, doesn't it make sense that the alchemy shop would maybe offer you a discount or perhaps a selection of more unique or experimental wares, maybe mention some kind of information that they knew specific to the hero's quest, since you're now a hero to that family. If the players disagree with a strictly lawful good action, that may lead to the suffering of a place that they love. They deserve the chance to disagree and to take another choice for that particular matter. Choices don't have to be these huge dramatic changes in narrative or the overall adventure. Baldur's Gate is still, ultimately, headed to roughly the same direction of story. However, each little choice does lead to different bumps, different roadblocks along that path, which is the same for a TTRPG. Even a slight change, a slight acknowledgement of what a player did, can hugely help build player investment in the story, the world, and the characters overall. Make everything feel like it matters. Multiple routes to a solution. Number 4. This is thankfully a commonplace ideal now, but I think it's good to reconfirm it and just reaffirm how it works. So, let's take again Act 1 and the Goblin Fortress within it. When storming the fortress, there are a number of solutions, from befriending the actual goblins and not even storming it at all, but rather joining them, to breaking through old walls and going in as a friend, then betraying them, or simply taking the direct route and going in for a full-on bloody slaughter. In Dungeons & Dragons, setting up an encounter can often mean hours of prep work as a DM. We want our encounter to go a specific way, and for the players to battle through full on and really have an epic moment. So much so that sometimes we can overlook something and keen-eyed players can find their way to a solution much faster than we intend. Trust me, I've had this happen, and hey, it can suck as a DM, but the thing is, Don't cover these up. Don't cover these gaps. Allow multiple solutions. Maybe there are weakened walls to the Lich's phylactery. Maybe the dragon hasn't checked it and there's some aspect of its hoard that is cursed and now it suffers a debuff. If your players charge a castle, let them climb the walls or dig under them or burst through the front door. Even if ultimately the fight ends up dealing with the same foes but it's a different order or in a different state, giving players the illusion of choice can really change things up and make it more valuable than anything else. It leads back into what I said before about choices. You can make them entirely minor, and honestly this might be something that I cover in an entirely separate video, so I don't know, let me know, maybe I'll work on that if you want to know more about it. However, there is a big point of just, if your players completely outplay and find a route that you didn't think about, reward them, let them do it. Even if ultimately you still deploy the same mechanics that you were going to before, you bring in the same NPCs but slower, reward them, let them feel like they have got one over on you, and you'll get them next time. There's always a next time. Number 5, and my last point. It's okay to let players be bad, but not be murder hobos. With 1,000 different stories out there in the world of RPG horror and murder hobos, it can be hard to agree with these words, but it's okay. Let your players be bad. Now, I mean this in 2 different senses of the word. 1, it is okay to let your players both fail, and 2, it is okay to let your players be evil. The heroes do not always have to be heroes. In fact, the heroes don't even have to fail. They don't have to succeed either. Sometimes it's just a far more interesting story if they don't succeed at all. The heroes get corrupted, or they see the villain's argument as just, actually, and it builds the world up. The villains slay the heroes, or did something monstrous affecting the wider world, or perhaps the heroes just never got there. They never did it. They failed. They cowered under the pressure, and they fled to a greater force. Worse still, what if instead they became the villains? They were the worst evil. In Baldur's Gate 3, you can fail. You can lose people. You can have them die. Just, it happens all the time. You can take the wrong decision, or you can take the morally bad decision. You can even be the real bastard in the situation. You can do twisted things that, in some cases, are worse than the villains themselves, depending on your morals at least, so why not the same in a tabletop setting? Now, I understand, and I will admit, that there are reasons why this is less popular, and I think that more often than not, when we put together D&D groups, or Pathfinder, Warhammer, whatever your flavour of fun, it's understanding that, hey, that group might not last. D&D groups, TTRPG groups, they tend to be limited in scope. Not everybody can commit for years, as some campaigns can last. Life hits us hard, so we try and enjoy it to the fullest. And a lot of what I'm mentioning is the setup for fun that leads into bigger stuff. People don't tend to want to lose interest in their personal downtime hobbies, especially in this age of story-themed D&D. The game is now less about wargames and more about narrative. I implore you to allow the failure of player agency. Let them sometimes just screw up. Let them fail. And as the DM, let the DM fail sometimes. Just let your encounters get thrashed. Let your players outsmart you. Let your players get crushed if they fail to heed your warnings. It will make for a more enticing game to allow failure, allow campaigns to fail, and build what happened into the next. That, however, is the end of my points for now. So I'm going to leave you with the 5 points, what we can learn from Baldur's Gate 3. I hope that ultimately this was a coherent point and you kind of get what I'm saying. I think there is a lot more to still learn from Baldur's Gate 3, but I kind of wanted to try and strip what I could from the game into something that you could, as a DM, coherently see and incorporate into your games. So, hey, hopefully it was helpful. I hope you can agree, or maybe not. What are your takeaways from BG3? Would you disagree with what I've said? Let me know down below, and thanks for watching. I will see you in the next video, and as always, if you do like this content, give it a like, or you can support me in my Patreon down below.